Right. So I am a little behind on this, and I know I am. But as of last summer, the channel did in fact turn 3. And while I don't have the time in the current State of the Union to make a separate State of the Union address about that, I could very hardly go without bringing up how 2020 has been for, I'm sure, a lot of us. So might as well jam it in on here. I have to say, 3 years ago, when I decided that this was going to be the thing that I was going to try to do with myself, never did I ever think I would be able to pay for an apartment by myself with D&D stuff. So first, foremost, 2 things. Let me say, 1, thank you, truly, for your support on Patreon, for, if you're folks at Paizo, for hooking me up with stuff early to make the workload a little easier, / to make me feel super cool. Watching the video, liking a meme, so on and so forth, driving the empire forward, because without y'all, I wouldn't be able to have achieved the level of success that I have. And second, for those of you out there who might be thinking, maybe I should try to get on the interwebs and make some money. Like, I come from very little, born with a plastic spork in my mouth. I have not a lot of education and am living proof that if there's something out there you want, you can get it. If I can do it, anybody can. Anyway, learned a lot on the channel in the past year. What makes good content, what makes bad content, how to self-promote myself on social media and get more clients. I truly, at the 3-year mark, I sit at a point where if I had any other groups want to join up and play D&D with me, I would seriously have to consider hiring a GM to work for BBG, because I've got so many groups right now. Only one of them goes on the channel, but that's because I no longer need to just jam all the content out there to promote myself. Truthfully, the channel looks a lot different than I thought it would 3 years ago, or even like 6 months ago. As to our future, 2020 has kind of been the year of Kingmaker on this channel, and I've heard a lot of people make comments about that. Let me just really quickly, hang on, stand by. Here's how many episodes of the LG Run of Kingmaker I have yet to upload. There's a shitload of them. I may have made a mistake running that here. I'll finish it. I've got them. There's no reason to not just run them through, throw them out there, get her done. But that will be the last we do, like, video games on the channel, just because I think I may have shot my own algorithm in the foot by uploading these. When Wrath comes out, am I playing it? Yeah. Hell yeah. But I'm going to do it on Twitch exclusively. Link in the description, of course, if you want to sub up and watch over there. Rather, the channel will focus more on this video series, other videos I can squeeze in as time permits, and one truly amazing group of patrons who's currently running through the Kingmaker adventure path, about to have some real crazy stuff happen to them in the narrative too. If you haven't watched it, you should check it out. Also on the channel front, I don't want to get out too far ahead of this because I'm not entirely sure where the timeline is, but I did have a really cool guy offer to GM for me and my friends and try to make a very super professional podcast to upload to like Spotify and places. Believe we're going to be running through Iron Gods, and that should come down before 2020 is out. Don't super quote me on that. There's a lot of moving pieces there still, but when I know, you will know. And yeah, look forward for more. The ship continues to sail on, grow, become even more powerful. I get called out sometimes in my groups that I don't record before sessions start that I will always say at the beginning of a session, thank you for keeping me pandemic-proof and having the coolest job on planet Earth. Most of the people, like patron-wise, probably know that I'm diabetic. You might not. Hi, my name is Tommy. I have type 1 diabetes. And also, during the COVID-19 pandemic, I'm one of those guys that, should I happen to get that thing, I would be worse off. I don't have to go out into the world and expose myself at a job more than like a couple days a week, really just for health insurance. And I guess this busted pancreas of mine might keep me in the service industry forever. Maybe we'll figure out better healthcare at some point. I don't know. We'll see. Point is, again, I am truly humbled. I appreciate it, and I shall continue to make the coolest content ever. Speaking of which, there's been a lot of people on the channel ask me personally for like stories of my old characters. That's kind of what we're doing today. I wanted to try to make my very first character that I ever played in my whole life an elf eventually Dragon Disciple in Pathfinder 2nd Edition. And of course, before we tell you those mechanics, we got to tell you the story of how even I got into D&D. I distinctly remember when I first started playing Dungeons & Dragons and thinking, you know, I kind of like this and am pretty good at this. I wonder if there's a market for this somewhere. Mind you, this is way before like Critical Role and the D&D Renaissance. A lot of people just looked at me funny. The proverbial get a real job, even like from my friends and peers, not just like the old people who still are super shocked when I'm calling to like up my insurance on something. Well, what do you do for a living, Mr. Daddy? Oh, there's my last name. You can stalk me now. Haha. Well, believe it or not, old person, I play Dungeons & Dragons on the internet for a living. And they just all immediately cognitive dissonance out because no one gets how you can do that. Here we are, doing that thing. Let's track it back to the beginning. If you're liking what you're seeing, like, subscribe, and ding the bell. Google Sheet for this one, of course, and all the other ones. If you support us on Patreon at any tier, support us a little higher, get access to the Encounter of the Month. I'll make an encounter for you to throw at your players and make them cry and scream bloody murder. Even higher end pay. You can make me figure out how I'm going to run so many games. / find a co-GM for BDG. It's truly a good problem to have, and thank you all. I mean it, truly. Let's dive in. Okay, so our story begins today in the autumn of 2012. I'd been out of high school for as long as BDG has existed. Damn, that's perspective. 21-year-old me trying to find his way in the world. Went to college for a little while, but it didn't super fit with anything I was trying to do. Had it in my head I was going to be like a history teacher or something, because that was about the only thing in high school I was good at, other than like finding space away from my family that didn't love me to sit on computers and play RuneScape. But that's a different story. I was fortunate enough to have a group of kind of misfit friends in the little town that I'd grown up with. Nobody I'd went to high school with. We'd all kind of gone our separate ways post high school. In particular, this group of friends I happened to bump into buying Yu-Gi-Oh cards. I didn't even really play Yu-Gi-Oh at the time. I was just like, I got $5 and I don't got bills because I'm a kid. Let's buy things. Ah, how good to be young. Sparked up a conversation with the dude. He invited me over to his place. One thing led to another. We became friends. Those guys had all stayed friends since high school, and they were like, I guess I'm just slightly younger than those guys now than I was then. Perspective again, that's gonna be the theme this episode, I suppose. There's about 3 or 4 guys, depending on who was working what shift, what night, in their like early to mid 30s. And their wives and kids, and we'd all go like hang out at the house, and I got to be Uncle Tommy for a little while. And we'd kind of always talked about D&D, like, oh hey, maybe we should throw some dice at some point. Does anyone want to run a thing? But nobody ever would. And at the time, the only thing I'd know about Dungeons & Dragons was Neverwinter Nights 2 and Temple of Elemental Evil. Kind of my gateway drug into the world. I knew I liked the thing, but I didn't exactly have the skill set necessary or like the group necessary to get down to business. Until one of their friends moves into town from another small town and brings all of his D&D stuff with him, and like as soon as he gets in, everyone is, hey, so-and-so, in case those guys watch my video, I don't want to just start vomiting their names everywhere, run a game of D&D for us. He reluctantly agrees. Next thing I know, I'm coming over for game night and everybody's got character sheets rolled up. I'm past a laptop with, I don't even remember what 3.5 CD this was that would like generate a character for you. Most of those people had to be walked through everything. And admittedly at the time I did too. I was told, hey, we don't really have any Arcanists yet. Maybe do some kind of wizardy sorcery thing. And that's when my brain jumped to, at the time, what I thought was the coolest class in the whole world in Neverwinter Nights 2, the Red Dragon Disciple, entirely because the class could get wings. That was the whole appeal for me. I don't have the I can fly dreams as much as I did when I was younger, but I played it a lot, not knowing how to build a character and mostly just dying in CRPGs. So instantly I'm hooked. That's what we're doing. Alongside, I believe one of the guys' wives also rolled up a sorcerer to join a party of 9 people. A druid, 2 clerics, a ranger, a barbarian, a rogue, two sorcerers, and the guy who wanted to do a GM PC running the thing, his sword sage, and why I've kind of been a little allergic to Pathowar ever since, because I guess I just flash back to that moment when his character is running circles around all of ours, just because he has all the access to all the things, and most of us don't know what our spells do. He runs for us a admittedly very fun one-shot. The guy was good at what he could do, and we all enjoyed ourselves, and bless that man for running a campaign for 9 people who are also like keeping their kids from beating each other over the head with foam swords, which I might or might not have donated to them for their birthdays. We don't talk about that. Stepping away from the table to smoke or to watch NASCAR or to do both. But when that wrapped up, you could never really get the guy to have the desire to roll up anything campaign-wise. He'd always just kind of, yeah, I'll get to it, and then never get to it. From there, the campaign kind of goes to this round-robin thing. Somebody would GM for these characters in a pseudo-shared universe type of thing once every like month or two. Usually we're just showing up to play Yu-Gi-Oh! Together. Until eventually, frankly, this frustrates the hell out of me, because I've finally landed on this thing that I've been curious about for a very long time, and turns out I really enjoy it. The social aspects are super fun, the big rush when someone rolls a natural 20 and the bad guy explodes. It feels super good, and on top of all of that, combines my passion for creativity, to build, to doodle on paper and make a thing happen, with my passion for dragons and shit, so I volunteered to be kind of a full-time game master. I'm sure some of you have heard the tales of when I was first GMing Dungeons & Dragons. I was doing it for a group of 9. Yeah, that was that group. It's a wonder the combats went as fast as they did, honestly. Maybe I just wasn't watching the time as much because my schedule was considerably more lax. In any case, I take this character that I've created and who, because we were basically all the same people, had made a lot of characters accidentally with like the exact same backstory. In my case, an elf with black hair from a forest to the south of the like meta region we were playing in. The ranger, also a black-haired elf from southern forest. Oops, I guess we're brothers or something. That guy was basically my brother at the time. Now he's kind of an asshole. He was kind of an asshole then. It's always like heavily implied in that group that, yeah, no, sure, I'd be more than happy to run something. I'll make something, yeah, sounds great. But people could never be bothered to do more than just a one-shot. And that meant that this character that I had started to invest in, envision a backstory of, envision your basic wants, needs, and really just like project onto really hard as I look back in hindsight, became the GM PC. I'd have him show up for combat sometimes when he would level in such a way like, oh, I got this really cool spell, I'm gonna go blow things up, wee. But mostly it was just there as sort of a plot device. The party was asked to travel south to this forest to help him and his father, a super secret black dragon, protect their village from conquering invaders, to in return have a big ol' elven army come and save the party's castle that they'd got from the Deck of Many Things, no less. Because if there's one thing the late 2000s taught you about fantasy tropes, it's that everyone needs an elven army. The group stuck for about a year or so. Then somebody's work schedule changed, and that was enough that we just kinda faded to black. I didn't get a chance to play D&D again until I'd met another group of people. That group also super intermittent. Not a lot of people that wanted to commit. Eventually, I realized game stores exist in the small town adjacent to the small town I was living in. I began making trips up there, start playing Magic there, meet people who play D&D there, one of which is still in my life at my tables today. And via that game store, I developed the chops that I finally needed to go from that guy who's really excited that, oh, I finally get to GM a Dungeons & Dragons game. I need to make a battle map. Quick, to Walmart for poster board and markers. I'll just draw a graph on top of this. I can't really draw straight lines, though. I still can't. Much like one of my patrons says, art is truly magic to me. And so are straight lines and I guess also rulers. To the guy who has enough confidence, skill, and talent to, after sitting on a forklift for 50 hours a week and not really liking where life had put me, noticing that there were other people in the space for 5th edition that were making better money than me, doing the thing they loved, and boom, there's the catalyst. Black Dragon Gaming is formed, named after this first baby little concept of a character that had essentially become just a plot device for some friends to play casually. I tried to play Mahariel twice at a couple other tables. In one case, the campaign was kind of somewhat fulfilling. This was during my time of all games must be Gestalt. We roll 4d6, reroll 1s and 2s, drop lowest. We cheese the rules so we can end up with like an 80 armor class, basically by just cheating and reading rules in such a way that they benefit us and only us. Good times. In another case, the group truly was not a good fit for me, but I'm very good at ignoring my own needs, which was something I kind of ignored for, well, a couple years, really. I'll spare you guys the grim and brutal details of that one. Suffice to say, 2020 has taught me a lot of things. One of those things is no group is strictly better than a bad group, and the internet can help you find people who are as dedicated and committed to the craft, who want to play the kind of game you want to play. But in any case, I think we've rambled enough about my personal life and waxed nostalgic about GMing during the heyday of The Walking Dead and throwing way too many zombies at a party that had 2 clerics in it. Neither cleric knew what turn undead was. This is 3.5, mind you. And I didn't know what hit dice were. I just jotted down some stats and said, these are monsters now, hooray! And somehow it was still challenging for them. Man, I miss those days. Anyway, let's talk the character. To make the build work, and one of the things I like the most about 2nd edition is I feel like I'm building not around optimized concept, but around like the character's roleplay, who this person is. And who Mahariel is the child of a black dragon and an elven woman who, over the course of that first campaign, was killed in the war. One of 3 triplets, because why not? And the only one who showed any sign of his father's draconic ancestry. This caused Dad to favor him over his other siblings, give him all the advances in life, teach him how magic works, and elevate him to a position of leadership within their community, knowing full well that this kid that he'd raised, dare I say groomed, really hadn't thought that far ahead. Didn't have a lot of great character development in my old campaigns. I mostly just wanted monsters and dragons and magic and things. Hooray! Would do exactly what he wanted, which was defend the elven village in the forest from an invading force that sought nothing more than to burn the trees, enslave everybody, and take all their stuff. A leader, someone who could survive in the thick of things, but also adapt to whatever situation would be thrown at the guy. Ironically, 2nd edition kind of pulls that off a little better than 3.5 did, but we're getting ahead of ourselves. Today, of course, we are building on an elf, an ancient elf no less, because if you're playing a caster, you don't get that class feat at first, getting the dedication at first. Instead, helps you kind of keep up on value-wise, in my opinion. Still would be really nice if you could take the other archetype feats a little sooner than 4th, but meh, we'll be fine. The Black Dragon Disciple to Be's bloodline is, of course, draconic, which gives us access to the arcane spell list, arcana and intimidation as our bloodline skills, a really good list of granted spells in shield, true strike, resist energy, haste, spell immunity, chromatic wall, dragon form, mask of terror, charismatic wall, and overwhelming presence at 9th of all things. Not gonna really worry about our bloodline spells aside from dragon breath, but we're getting that from Dragon Disciple, so we'll worry about that later. Our blood magic, which triggers anytime we cast a bloodline spell or a granted spell, draconic scales grow briefly on you or one target, granting a +1 status bonus to AC for a round, which is really good considering we have to struggle to get armor proficiencies in this build. Eventually we'll be dexy enough that we can just ride on Mage Armor, if not bracers of armor, but lots of dex, a chain shirt, and a +1 status bonus to AC should keep us pretty good. Just don't expect to hold the wall by yourself. For the background, we're looking to buff strength and charisma, and we will want to begin play with a strength of 14, dex of 14, con of 10, int of 10, wiz of 10, chaw of 18. Certainly I would love to see that con a little higher. Again, grabbing extra flaws for another boost or point buy or rolling or things can make these stats look a little tastier. Class feats, here we go, at level 2, though I really wanted to squeeze in somehow, some way, a big ol' snake companion, because in the course of my early GMing, I gave everyone a free animal companion. Then when I could finally squeeze a one-shot out of somebody, they gave me a legendary snake from 3.5. There were a couple of people at that table that were very mad that I had that. But Dangerous Sorcery. When you cast a spell from your spell slots, if the spell deals damage and does not have a duration, you gain a status bonus to that spell's damage equal to the spell's level. This feels like the equivalent of the Draconic Bloodlines +1 per die rolled when doing spells that are acid spells. Magic Missile now being a 1d4 +2. Nothing to shake a greatsword at. Speaking of Magic Missile and greatswords, though really it'll probably land more like a long spear, simple weapons are the ones that we get the best proficiency with without jumping through way too many hoops, and honestly, if I can attack an adjacent guy with a reach weapon, a long spear will do me just fine. Ancient Elf giving us access to, I think I forgot to say this, hoopsie, the Fighter archetype for more martial things. Power Attack, our feat at 4th. For 2 actions, make a melee strike. This counts as 2 attacks when calculating the map. If the strike hits, you deal an extra die of weapon damage. If you're at least 10th level, increase this to 2 dice, and if you're 16th, increase it to 3. I think that's basically the dance move for this character. 1 action, True Strike, choose that as a signature spell, oh yeah. Heightening up a True Strike for no effect feels kinda bad till you remember it's for 1 action I'm rolling with advantage, and then I'm power attacking you for extra dice, which is very likely to roll 15 or more, which is very likely to critically hit, or if you don't feel like hedging your bets in that way, you can always power attack and then 1 action Magic Missile, a 1 action spell that does not use the map. We'll round out the Fighter archetype at level 6 with 1 more feat for now, Opportunist, granting us the Attack of Opportunity reaction. Seems pretty strong and pretty on flavor for the guy who wants to be in the thick of things, wants to have a response for things, is here to protect his people, and mechanically, who might be running around with a reach weapon and an enlarged spell with an enormous threat range. No one expects the Sorcerer to have Attack of Opportunity. Oops, until they're dead on the floor. Anyway, next up, the Dragon Disciple Dedication. From Jump, it simply is a +1 circumstance bonus to saves against sleep effects and effects that would make you paralyzed, as well as resistance equal to half our level, in our case against acid damage, but mostly we're just trying to dive into Value Town, which we do next with Breath of the Dragon. This grants us the Dragon Breath Sorcerer Bloodline spell, and a focus pool of 1 focus point. If you already have a focus pool, increase your number of focus points by 1. Dragon Breath, of course, for 2 actions, in a 30-foot cone or 60-foot line originating from you. In our case, indeed, it's a 60-foot line. We start out with 5d6 acid damage in a 60-foot line, but since we're taking this at 10th level, that means the spell is heightened to 5th, or 9d6 acid. Especially later on when some other feats come online, it becomes really good to fire off a Dragon Breath and then start swinging afterward. This is another effect that does not use the map, and truthfully, this is the first time I've ever built a Dragon Disciple with optimization in mind. Generally speaking, I've always been here to just remake that first character and have that, like, Neverwinter Nights nostalgia. But attaching a breath weapon to a martial is kind of like attaching a shotgun to the front of a bulldozer. Having something to spray in multiple directions and then swing your sword at the stragglers helps spread the damage out by quite a bit, and it gives you more options in combat than just, I attack that guy, to say nothing of our spell slots. Bopping back over to the Fighter next for Furious Focus. When you make a power attack with a melee weapon you're wielding in 2 hands, like a long spear, it counts as 1 attack towards your multiple attack penalty instead of 2. Or it buys off some of our penalties for swinging in for extra damage. It seems like a no-brainer. Quickened Casting is next, of course, to help preserve our action economy, followed immediately by Disciple's Breath, or a big, much more full breath weapon. For 2 actions, you unleash a breath weapon without spending focus. This has the effects of your Dragon Breath Sorcerer Bloodline spell, though it deals 9d6 instead of its normal damage, and you don't have to cast it or spend a focus point. You can't use Disciple's Breath again for 1d4 rounds, so eventually the Dragon's Breath focus power will outclass this, but this happens all the more. Feels real good when you roll 1s on a 1d4, and next turn you can just fire this off again. It's real tasty. Except for the bad guys. They taste like half melted and sad. We'll worry about that later. Taking this one super late. Next up, maybe I value this one a little too high. Maybe, but in a world where everything is doubled on a crit and we're so often true striking, Bespell Weapon seems real good. Once per turn is a free action if your most recent action was to cast a non-cantrip spell. Until the end of your turn, the weapon you're wielding deals 1d6 extra damage of a type depending on the school you just cast. I feel like most often for us, this will be mental damage from True Strike's Divination or force damage from a magic missile. But even if this is like 2-action Fireball then a d6 of extra fire damage on our weapon, that still feels like value to me, especially when we're not getting as many attacks in a round as like the Rangers and Rogues and Pure Fighters. An extra 1d6 that can so easily become an extra 2d6 before anybody's weaknesses or things feels really good. But I digress. Lastly, Tenacious Blood Magic. It's a free action. Once per minute, you apply an effect from your blood magic that lasts for a round. It lasts for a minute instead. +1 status bonus to AAC for a minute in high level play is probably that whole combat. You don't have to worry about it kicking off or even micromanaging it, just it's there, fire and forget. Skill feats as always are entirely up to you. For our Ancestry feats, out the gate feeding into that always be 10 steps ahead of the bad guys, Ancestral Longevity. During daily prep, you can reflect upon your life experiences to gain the trained proficiency rank in one skill of your choice. This proficiency lasts until you prep again. You can't use it as a prereq for skill increases or permanent character option because it's not forever and ever. But this feels right up the character's wheelhouse. Sometimes we're going to be running through the deep forest and I might need to be proficient in survival to help people get through the woods. We're going to be fighting oozes for the next 5 weeks, but probably not after that. Let's grab occultism as a temporary thing, but not anything permanent. Oh man, I've got to be the face, but we're going to Seedy Town. Better train Intimidate, so on and so forth. This is just really powerful. Elven Instincts lets us grab Incredible Initiative on the Ancestry feat side, as long as we're rolling Perception. Probably looks a little better on your Rogues and Investigators and things, but yeah, it's fine. Take that +2, go first, get set up, stab them dead. We'll follow that up immediately with Brightness Seeker. Once per day, you can spend 10 minutes studying your surroundings in search of omens related to a particular course of action to cast Augury as an innate divine spell. Unless the results of the Augury was nothing, you gain the following reaction for the next 30 minutes. Call upon the brightness. Its trigger, you attempt an attack roll, skill check, or save while performing the course of action from your Augury, but you haven't rolled yet. You get a +1 status to the triggering check, or a +2, which is really big in 2nd edition, if the result was woe and you proceeded anyway. If you know you're going into the boss fight and the whole world is telling you, nah man, this is gonna hurt, then you need to make that fort save. This helps you do it a little better. Also, Augury and a lot of divination shenanigans are some of the most helpful things you can get in a campaign. Literally, this could save lives. If nothing else, it saves some of the other casters a spell slot for you to grab it this way. After that, it's Halfling Luck, Guiding Luck. You knew you'd see it. Does it feel right for the character I had created at the time? No, not at all, frankly. But every time you port an old concept into a new system, I think you're going to find changes like that are inevitable. And a lot of the other feats just didn't really jive with me. Maybe they'll like better longevity feat. But honestly, I'd rather just make sure that I don't eat it on accident and let my people down. For the general feats, it's armor proficiency once for light armor. I think our decks, which eventually will land at 20, can just hide behind the Mage Armor and be okay. If nothing else, we're faster than a lot of things on the board. Speed can be armor, or like fly out of the way and stab down. That feels real good too. Toughness for more hit points, adopted by halflings for shenanigans, die hard so you don't die hard, and canny acumen for your fort save. Maybe one day they'll have some more interesting general feats, but it doesn't seem to be today. And last but not least, before we kind of wind this one down, man, this video is going to be a long one. Let's talk some spells. Of course, True Strike for 1 action, roll with advantage, easy peasy. Feels good on everybody who can cast this thing. So too does Overwhelming Presence, a 9th level spell on the Divine and Occult tradition, but available to us through our bloodline for 2 actions in a 40-foot burst targeting any number of creatures at will save until full tribute is paid. You surround yourself with supernatural splendor, appearing to be a god or similarly majestic being. You choose the aspects of your new majestic appearance. This causes the targets to pay tribute to you by bowing or using some other action in keeping with your appearance. The number of times the target must do this depends on the result of their will save. A crit success, nothing happens. A success, the target must pay tribute twice. On a failure, it's 6 times. On a critical failure, it's 6 times, and the target must spend all their actions paying tribute. If possible, they basically lose 2 turns. Paying tribute is a manipulate action or a move action. Paying tribute provokes an attack of opportunity from you, as chosen by the creature paying tribute. A creature under this effect must pay tribute to you at least once on each of its turns if possible. While affected by this spell, a creature is fascinated by you and can't use hostile actions against you. The target is temporarily immune for 1 minute. Kneel as I stab you in the face. Not only does this provide you with a little bit of a defense because they can't attack you, it essentially leaves these people at your mercy. It's gross. Enlarge, again, just helps our threat range get even bigger and bigger and bigger, makes us clumsy ones, so that feels kind of bad, but it's a +2 status bonus on damage, which helps us, again, keep up with the barbarians and fighters and things that are also on the front line with us. Magic Missile, heightened, feels real good. That's a lot of d4s all over the place. Why I like it here, though, is, again, you can just throw a 1-action Magic Missile without screwing up your ability to hit later on. Magic Missile, True Strike, and then Strike feels pretty good. And I'm betting is a good way to clean up a combat towards the end when somebody's at like half HP. But lastly, Mage Armor. This gets us a +1 item bonus to AC and a max dex of 5, which is eventually where our dex lands. While wearing Mage Armor, you use your unarmored proficiency to calculate your AC, which eventually goes to Expert from defensive robes, and we get a +1 status from our Dragony scales. Heightening this up not only helps us not have to buy magic armor, it should keep us mostly on par with folks. Granted, the champions in legendary full plate and shields and things will outrun us, but given our dex gets pretty high, this remains nothing to shake a stick at. And it lasts until your next daily prep as well. In some strange universe where you can't sleep and you never get a chance to get your spell slots back, seems to be Mage Armor just stays on forever. In any case, it feels a lot better than just that hours per level thing that it used to be. Melee sorcerers need all the buffs they can get, we know this. And yeah, that's the one. That's my very first character, how I would build them in 2nd edition. I don't know where I would play them. I don't know if I'd ever get a chance to play them other than like kind of half throwing the concept together for the slithering. And given that there's not a lot of backstory going on in a module where you show up and then the Oozapalooza is down to business, perhaps this is a character that will only ever be able to live, function, and thrive in the back of my head as my first ever foray into the TTRPG world. At the time, simply a creative outlet that I was good at. Present day, a creative outlet that I'm good at and have the supreme honor of paying my bills with. It's been wild. And before we sign off again, one more time, really quick, thank y'all for hanging out for as long as you have. Maybe you've been here since like the first video. Maybe this is a new one for you. BDG's been a ride, and a lot of you have seen me at my absolute lowest. A lot of you have been very instrumental in my own process of learning what the hell mental health is, and that it's okay to take care of these things and not like a bad stigma, like I feel like society often points at mental health. I've met a lot of really cool people from the channel. BDG has helped me meet a lot of really, really cool people, and I'm looking forward to meeting more of you and several more years of the ship sailing on. What the hell do y'all think? Melee sorcerers. I know everybody likes to drag them secretly. The reason that I stick up for them is the first thing I ever built was a weird melee sorcerer, and I loved him. I think next week I'm going to go ahead and take a small self-care week, at least from min-maxing for fun and profit. The leaves are starting to turn in Kansas City, and I'd like to go walk amongst them. After that, I suppose we're digging on into the request line. Remember, patronage at any tier can get your requests to the front of a very long line. Till then, thank you all for watching. We'll see you next time.